back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. It's a beautiful day outside. I have a good video for you today. Today's topic of the video is to talk about some of my favorite knots that I like to use. Okay, now in my hand you can see that I have a little bit of small cordage. I have a small length of static line, and I also have a small length of dynamic line. Now you can tell in the background here I'm wearing a white shirt. The purpose of the white shirt is to show the contrast of the colors so I can share the knots that I'm trying to show with you, the ones that I'm trying to share. Now right now I'm going to be using this 11 mil dynamic rope. This is because I want to exaggerate the knots. I'm using a big thick rope so that you can see things more clearly. Each knot that I'm going to show you it at least 3 times. The first time will be the exact view that you're looking at me right now. It's going to show me tying the knot. The second view that you're going to see is actually as if you were looking out of my eyes, looking at my hands, okay, and watching my hands work. And the third view that you'll see is going to be me actually taking you out and showing you the application of the knot. So not only am I just going to show you how to tie it, but I'm also going to show you what I use it for. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each knot and what my opinions are, what I like about them, what I don't like about them, and what I use them most for. So I hope that you enjoy this video and stay tuned. I have a lot to show you. Okay everybody, let's get started. The first knot that I want to share with you is a very, very simple one. Everybody knows this knot. It's the basic overhand knot. So I have my rope here. You can see my contrasted shirt here. I have my tail. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a small loop. See that? I'm going to make a small loop, just like so. And this tail is just going to run through this loop. Pull it out and you make an overhand knot. Very simple. Here goes your basic overhand knot. So I take the tail end, I come in front of the rope, I go around the back, out through, pull tight, and that is your basic overhand knot. You've seen me tie the knots. I've showed you with my hands up close and personal. And now I want to take you through some of the applications. I'm not going to do all the knots, but I'm going to try to do most of them. I'm going to be using orange paracord for the most part for this demonstration of these, what I would use these knots for. Okay, so the overhand knot, one of the simple things about the overhand knot that I like is in the case of paracord, you see how the end kind of gets frayed? Just a simple overhand knot in the end of the paracord will help stop it from fraying. Another good thing that you can use the overhand knot for is, say for example you have a slip knot. Okay, so I'm going to create a small slip knot. I'm going to do it quickly because you've already seen it. Okay, so I'm going to create a small slip knot, and let's say you use the working end of the line as the tail. Okay, see that? If you want this thing to not slip out, you don't want it to do this, right? So you could put an overhand knot in the working end of that line, of that slip knot. Okay, I'll show you again. So there's your slip knot. Here's your working end. That's your tail. That's the one that you're going to pull. But you don't want this slip knot to undo itself, so you could put just a simple overhand knot in the end of something like that, and not only will it stop your paracord from fraying like I said, but it'll also stop that slip knot from coming undone. Your basic overhand knot on a bite. Okay, so you want to have a tail over here, and you basically make the same motion, but you're using this loop. So I'm coming underneath, you can see that, coming underneath, and then what's going to happen is this loop's going to go through the hole and pop out the other side. This makes your basic overhand knot on a bite. Okay, your basic overhand knot on a bite. So I'm going to have the tail end. I'm going to create a little bite here, a little loop. Here's the tail end. I'm going to come around in front of, and then I'm going to take this loop, I'm going to go behind, and notice it peeking through. So I'm going to be just like this, and I'm going to pop it through towards us. Now, from here I have kind of a jumbled mess. I have to pull everything clean, and that is an overhand knot on a bite. Okay, now let's talk about overhand knot on a bite. Okay, so I'm here. I'm just going to make a simple overhand knot. Whoops, not a figure of 8 on a bite. Overhand knot on a bite. Okay, so there it is right there. What are we going to use this for? Let's see. Maybe we'll hook our water bottle to it. Use it to hold that. Something like that. Okay, something light duty. You don't want nothing too crazy. You don't want it to be real heavy of a load. Otherwise this will tighten up and it'll be difficult to get out. And the result might be you might have to cut this. So light duty applications, overhand knot on a bite. Your basic figure of 8 knot. Okay, again, I have my tail here. Most of these knots that I'm going to be showing in this video, I'll have the tail in this hand. Okay, so I'm here, I have my tail. I'm going to come around the back, or should I say close to me. See that? Coming around over here. Now I'm going to come around the front by you, and you can see that it resembles, darn flies, it resembles a figure of 8. Now this tail is going to come back towards me and out to you through this hole. This makes our figure of 8. Your basic figure of 8, I'm going to take the working end, I'm going to come in front, I'm going to go behind. There's my figure of 8, you see that? Now this working end, this tail, is going to come through the hole. Just like so. That there is your basic figure of 8. The figure of 8, the standard figure of 8, it doesn't really have any significant use by itself other than being the start for us to tie into our harness. Okay, so that's really the only purpose that I see for having this standard figure of 8. Not really anything that you can use just that for. I mean, it might serve as a stop in your rope. It could be kind of the same thing you would use an overhand knot for, you know, maybe to stop things, but really that's about it for this one. Pretty simple. Okay, now we're having a knot called a figure of 8 on a bite. It's the same thing we just did. Here's my tail end. Okay, I'm going to have quite a bit of tail here. See that? Kind of long. Now I'm going to take this top loop and I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to come around back towards myself. See, it's coming behind. Hope you can see that. I'm holding it together with my thumb and my index finger. I'm going to come around towards you. See that with my loop. Come back towards me, and now this loop is going to go through this hole right here out towards you. This is a figure of 8 on a bite. Now when you get your knot made, you want to make sure that you clean everything up, especially a knot like this, because this knot is very good for climbing applications. That's a figure of 8 on a bite. It's an excellent knot to know. Your basic figure of 8 on a bite. Okay, I have my working end, my tail here. Gonna create a loop. Come all the way up. The loop comes down and the loop comes in front. Notice everything's nice and clean. Whoops, dropped it there. So it's like this. Then the loop comes around the back, comes forward towards us, and shoots through. This is your overhand, or excuse me, your figure of 8 on a bite. Your figure of 8 on a bite. This one is good for a lot of things. Okay, again, just like we did earlier, water bottle, stuff like that. Again, it's very similar to the overhand knot on a bite. You don't want to use big old heavy duty stuff. Another thing that you could use is, like, for example, there's a tree behind me. I'll zoom into that tree a little bit and I'll show you. You know, you could use this. Say you want to run a ridge line around this tree. You could use this overhand knot on a bite to run a ridge line. Okay, so that's another good use for this figure of 8 on a bite. I may have said the name wrong there a second ago, but that's a good use for it. Okay, figure of 8 on a bite, but we're going to trace it through. So we're going to start with our tail hand, just as we always did. And we're going to come around. We're going to make our standard figure of 8 that we did a minute ago. See that? Coming here, making my loop, coming back towards you with the tail, back towards me, and the tail is going to poke through the hole. Okay, so there's our standard figure of 8. Now we're gonna retrace it back. Now what we have to do is we have to take this tail and follow this line. So if you look, this line, where does it go? It goes through here. So what this would be good for would be, like, say we're gonna connect something to it, right? So you want to run it through back this way. Okay, you can see that I'm following it. Now where does this rope go? It goes behind, right? So I'm going to follow it behind. Now where does it go? See, it goes here. It goes inside. So I'm going to come here inside. There we go. Now where? It goes around the front and where? Out the back. Okay, so there we go. Looks like my tail is a little bit short, but nonetheless you get the point, right? This is a threaded in figure of 8 on a bite. This is a good one to use for rock climbing applications. See that? You want to make sure it's nice and clean. So that's a figure of 8 on a bite threaded in. Okay, figure of 8 on a bite traced through or threaded. Here's my working end. I'm going to make a figure of 8. Standard figure 8. See that? Now what I want to do is I want to go around something, such as a carabiner, or maybe the harness, maybe my harness on a climbing situation. Let me come from the other side here. Okay, now what I need to do with this tail end here, this end over here that I'm wiggling, I need it to follow the first end. So it's going to come in, tighten everything up. Now it's going to come around, come through here, back around, and hopefully I have enough rope here. Now if you get this thing kind of twisted, you might want to retrace it. In our case, it's kind of twisted, so I'm going to twist this, unclip, reclip. Now generally speaking, you would want your tail to be a little bit longer, but that's what a threaded figure of 8 on a bite looks like. It's a very strong knot, very good to know. Okay, the figure of 8 on a bite, the one that you retrace, this could be used This is a very, very common knot for climbing. So I start with my standard figure of 8, and you can see that I have a Swiss seat on. This is what I would use to come under both of my layers, and I'll use this. Let me turn the camera angle down. I will use this to thread through. This is how I would get myself tied in. Now, if you're going to do any kind of climbing or rappelling application, you want to make sure that you check your knot very well, and that you make sure that you have a good long tail on there. Not too long, but you know, you could also put like a little half hitch on there too to kind of get it out of the way. But that's the figure of 8 on a bite threaded through. That's one of the best things you can use that for, your harness. Okay, figure of 9. This is basically the same thing as a figure of 8, but it's a little bit stronger. Okay, so we take our tail end, we come towards ourselves, okay, with the tail, out towards you. Now, technically, if we were going to make a figure of 8, we would just shoot it right through right now and finish, you know, terminate the knot. But for a figure of 9, what we want to do here is we want to take this tail, come all the way around to the front and run it back to us through here. This is what they refer to as a figure of 9. This is basically a stronger version of a figure of 8. Figure of 9 on a bite. So we're here, we have our tail. We're going to do the same thing, just like the figure 8. We're going to take this top portion that I'm holding, this loop. We're going to come around, just like so, behind, you know, and what I mean by that is towards me. See that? It's coming towards me. Now, this loop is going to come around, whoops, towards you. Whoop, I know that's getting sloppy, sorry. Now, if it was a figure of 8, it would just shoot right through here. There's my figure of 8, but we want to make a figure of 9. So let me start this over. Sorry about that. So we're here, 1, 2. Now, there's my figure of 8 right there, basically. I would shoot this through. Figure of 9, I'm going to come around to you, back through to me. Right there, boom. Figure of 9 on a bite. Very strong. Okay, figure of 9 on a bite. Here's my working end. Working end's over here. I'm going to make a bite, a loop here. I'm going to start just like I was going to make a figure of 8. And instead of taking this and putting it through here and finishing the figure of 8, see that? Instead of doing that, I'm going to pull this back out. What I want to do is I want to go all the way around the back and poke it in from the back coming forward. See that? This is referred to as a figure of 9 on a bite. This is an excellent knot, very strong. Figure of 9 on a bite. Okay, the figure of 9 on a bite, again, it's very similar to the figure 8 on a bite. This is just when you want something a little stronger. A lot of the applications are the same. Okay, it's not that big of a deal. You just want something solid, and you don't want it, you know, to slip on you. This is a good knot for that. Again, you don't want to use this for towing because it'll create too much. It'll tighten too much and it'll create a lot of problems. So again, figure of 9 on a bite. Not that you would use 11 mil for a water bottle, but you get the point. You could clip into something. Okay. You can also use this if you had a carabiner. You could use the figure of 8 on a bite for the same thing that I'm fixing to mention. If you had a carabiner, gosh, I'm trying to get it off my water bottle. If you had a carabiner, let's say the carabiner was clipped into the rock, right? You could use these to clip in. Maybe you're going to make a dog run, You know, there's all kinds of uses for these figure 8s on a bite, and this figure of 9 on a bite, and the overhand knot on a bite. You know, you have a nice little ridge line. You can make a nice dog run. My dog would love it. She doesn't like being tied up. Bowline, or some people like to call it a bowline. Okay, here's my tail. I want to make a small loop towards myself. See that? Now I'm going to take this tail, and the story was that the snake would come out his hole. See, he's coming out of his hole. He would come around the tree, which here's the snake going around the tree, and he would go back in his hole. This is your classic bowline. Now, there's something that I like to do with my bowline that's a little different than the norm, and that is where the tail finishes. Right now the tail is inside the loop. I like doing mine a little different. I like putting my tail outside the loop. So when I come in here, I come around the tree to the outside, and then I go back in the hole. So my tail on my bowline is on the outside, just like so. That's a good knot. This one I like to use a lot when I'm towing things, because if you put a tremendous load on it, it's still very easy to undo. Good knot to know. The bowline. Okay, here's my working end. I'm going to make a small loop. This tail is going to come out the hole, and the way I like to do it is around the tree and back out the hole. Back in the hole, I should say. That's the bowline. Now, the standard way that I see bowlines tied a lot is not the way I do it. They come around and they come in, and I don't care for it this way because the tail ends up inside of the loop. I don't like it that way. So mine's a little different. It's very good for a load-bearing knot because it has two pieces in here and only one in here, so you can tighten and tug all you want, and then when you're done you just flop this down and it loosens this, which in turn loosens the whole thing, and it basically falls apart right in front of you. My favorite knot of probably all of these is the bowline. Okay, I use this a lot for ridge lines when I'm going to be making any kind of shelter or any kind of protection of the wind, or in the case of the portion of the video where you saw that I had that back lay where I was showing my hands tying the knots, I used a ridge line and I used a bowline on the end. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I like my tail on the outside, but again, take this bowline, you know, run it around a tree, make you a good ridge line. Cool thing about this is you can put a ton of pressure on it. I'll show you this here while I'm doing this video. I'll show you. Okay, so I'm pulling this line back. Let's get this bowline. Okay, now let me come over here. I'm going to put a ton of pressure. You can see how tight I'm pulling this thing. Now let me undo it. Come up here to you, and you'll be able to see that even though I had a lot of pressure on this line, it's very easy to undo. There's my bowline. I put a ton of pressure on it. You just pull this single part off. It loosens this. I don't even have any nails, and I'm able to undo it. Just kind of falls apart on you. So that's one of the good things about the bowline. If you're going to tow a vehicle, pull your buddy out of the mud or whatever, use the bowline. Now, I want to show you one thing real quick while I'm thinking about the bowline. That if you want to add, say you want to tow something really heavy and you want to guarantee that that thing will come undone easily, let me show you something that you can add to your bowline that'll help make it come out. So you're going to tie your standard bowline right in around the tree. Okay, here we go. Now, when you get to this point where you would normally stick this through, just double it in half, and then double it in half again, and stick all 4 of those in and pull this tight. What this will do is this will create 4 levels of thickness right here, and you only have 1 on the back side, so you could put like a ton of force on this, and because there's 4 here and 1 here, it'll always stay loose. So that's a little trick that you can use for your bowline. Another thing you can use that for is you can pull these tails, and it'll kind of be like a slip knot, if you will, and it'll undo the bowline for you. So think about that. It's a good knot. Don't forget that one. The lark's foot, or some refer to it as a lark's head. So basically you have your tail end. You're going to stick your finger and your thumb inside, pull upward, and pull both of these little loops through. And what you end up with is this. And this is referred to as your lark's foot or lark's head. This is good for securing things. The lark's foot or lark's head, doesn't matter which end's which. You basically put your fingers inside, reach up, pull these 2 together, pull through, just like so. So that would be your lark's foot or lark's head. Okay, the lark's foot or the lark's head is anytime you want to come around something and tie something to it. So there's a couple ways. You can make it like this and slip it around the object, clean the knot up, and you could do it like that. So you want to tie, say you want to pull something or tie something, you could do it like so. Or let's say this is something that you can't get around. Well, then what you would do is you'd come around the back, come around the front, come here, and again you have your lark's foot. I also like to use this when I have my tarps and I'm going to be connecting grommets, or making external grommets as I call it, and I'll show you that here shortly. Let me get this camera moving and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, right here is a prime example. Okay, you see right here I have a piece of wood or something inside, and I'm using a lark's foot, lark's head, to hold that together. Same thing here, lark's foot, lark's head, holding my tarp. Again, you come to the edge of my ridge line. Okay, what do you got there? Lark's foot. Actually, I don't on that one. I have a slip knot. But again, you get the point that I'm making. The lark's foot, or lark's head, as many call it, is good for things like that. Okay, you can also use it for applications such as hanging a water bottle. Maybe you have a water bottle, something like this, and you want to just put a little lark's foot or lark's head, stick it around the top, then you have your water bottle. You can hang it or whatever you got to do. Okay, so that's one option for you. But that's it. That's some of the uses for the lark's foot. Okay, your standard prusik. So basically you have a larger diameter line, and what you want to do is you want to take a small loop in a smaller line, and basically you're going to make 3 lark's heads or lark's foots. So you're going to come through. So there's one. This would be a lark's foot or a lark's head. See that? And you're just going to do it 2 more times. You're going to come around again, reach through, pull them out, and 1 more time. You're going to pull all of these through. Now, when you cinch everything together, this creates, I know, I'm sorry, my hand's getting in the way, but this creates a nice little knot that can be used to tighten itself against whatever it's hanging on to. This is your prusik. This is an excellent one to know. Okay, your standard prusik. You're going to come around the back of the line. Hopefully we can see this. So I'm behind the line. I'm reaching through like I would a lark's foot, and I'm pulling everything through. I'm going to do that 3 times, and each time I come inside. Let me zoom this in a little bit so you can see. So each time I go through, I come inside. So again, let's lark's foot it again. Let's shove those 2 through. See that? Shove it through one more time. Now we'll clean it up. And you can pull on this, and that would be your prusik. So it looks like that. It's a very good knot to know. That's your prusik. Okay, the prusik, this is a classic knot. This is one that is just one of my favorites. The prusik is just an amazing knot. So let me start here. I'm going to tie a quick bowline, and this will all make sense here shortly. Okay, so I'm going to tie another quick bowline. Kind of sneak this one in. My dog is just going nuts in the background. She's like running and going crazy. So I have 2 bowlines connecting themselves to each other, so nothing's going to slip. Now, my prusik. Let's say, for example, I want to climb this rope behind me. I don't know if you can see that or not. I don't have a harness with me, but let's go ahead and use this prusik. This is a good knot. You just come around. 1, 2. I've used this tons in search and rescue and climbing. It's a great knot. Don't ever forget this one, it's good. Okay, so let's say, for example, you have a little piece of webbing here or something, and I've got my water knot in there, tied my webbing together. Let's say that's what I'm going to use as my foothold. This prusik, you can see it's biting on this rope here, and it's not going to let me go anywhere. See that? I'm putting a ton of weight on this prusik, and it bites on this rope. You could use that to actually climb up the rope. Another use for the prusik, let me show you, would be these guys right here, my tarps. I use prusiks to hold my tarps against the ridge line. Okay, these are drop cloths that I'm using today. I'm just using it more for shade than anything. But that's the prusik. Okay, now the cleaner that you can make your prusik, the more effective it'll work. Another thing I want to mention while I'm talking about this is the level of detail of cleaning it up. You want to make sure, and it'll come out very easily too. See that? That's the way the prusik should look. And again, I'll put my foot in this stirrup. I'll put a bunch of weight on it and let you see it. See, it doesn't do anything. And then I can loosen a little bit, and it'll go up. See that? It went up just a little bit. Come here, loosen, slip, go up a foot or 2. It'll grab again, and so on. Prusik is an excellent knot. Clove hitch. Okay, so here's my tail. What I want to do is I want to make a little loop here, and the tail is underneath. See that? The tail is underneath. Now I'm going to make another loop, putting the tail over the top. So I have, in some ways, a figure of 8, but both the ropes here are on top. Now what I want to do is I want to fold both of these loops upward, and you have, if you tighten this thing up a little bit, you have, it's kind of like a lark's foot or a lark's head, except they're not both coming out of the same side. You have one coming out of each side. Now this is a good one to use in a lot of rock climbing applications because you can put a load on either side and it'll tighten itself, and it's very easy to undo. For example, you have a carabiner around it. When you unclip it, the thing just falls apart and there's nothing there. So that's a clove hitch. I use it a lot. Your clove hitch, you have your working end. You're going to make a small loop, leaving this on top, and then you take your tail end and you make an opposite loop. So you have almost a figure of 8, like a racetrack. And then what you'll do is you'll collapse these two together going upward, and you'll have one loop, or should I say one tail, coming out of each end. Then you can clip this with a carabiner, tighten things up, and believe it or not, both sides of this is load bearing. And the cool thing about this in a climbing situation is when you're finished, you just unclip it and it falls apart. That's your clove hitch. Okay, the clove hitch, right behind me here I have a ridge line. Okay, I'm going to put a carabiner on that ridge line. The clove hitch, again, this is good for clipping into carabiners, and you can put a load on it. Okay, let me do it a little longer. So let's say I got this, I'm going to clip in. There's my clove hitch. Now I can put a load on either side of this. Now another thing that I could do with the clove hitch is I could do my water bottle. In fact, this is probably one of my favorite ones for water bottles, is the clove hitch, because look, you don't have to do anything. It's a self-tightening kind of knot. That's the clove hitch. Those are some of the uses for it. Let me give you a little closer view of that. So I have the clove hitch on my carabiner on my small ridge line, and if you're curious about this line, this is number 36 bank line here. It's the rival to paracord. I like it better than paracord actually. So there it is. This other one is free to do whatever, and that one's holding the load no problem. Okay, so again, this tail end here, it could go anywhere, do whatever it wants. But that's the clove hitch. I love that knot. It's very, very good, very useful. Your square knot. Square knot is something that's good to use when you want to join two pieces of rope. Okay, so basically you make an overhand knot, if you will. Okay, so if it goes left over right, it'll go right over left, so that you have it looking like this. That's your square knot. So as you pull, whoops, so you're going to go left over right, right over left. Now as you pull, this thing tightens up. See that? That's your standard square knot for joining two pieces of rope. Okay, square knot. Left one is going to go over the right one, like so. And then the right one will go over the left one. Tighten it up. There's your square knot. Both of your tails are on the same side of the knot. And when you pull, it stays pretty tight. That's your square knot. Left over right, right over left. The square knot, I have several uses for that. One of them is the harness that I'm wearing. Okay, there's two square knots right here. One, two. There's one in the back. Let's say I have a pocket knife and I want to hang this pocket knife onto my waist. So basically I could take a piece of rope, let me untangle this thing, and use this as a belt in a survival situation. Maybe I don't have the things I need, at my disposal, but I want to carry this knife. Okay, so I just take me a little bit of rope, left over right, right over left. Tuck this out of the way, and there you have it. I have a nice place to put my knife. And again, I used a square knot to do that. The granny knot can happen when you're trying to tie a square knot. And it's if you go left over right and then you go left over right again, you'll get something that looks like this. And this is what they refer to as a granny knot. And the problem with this, see, even if you pull it tight, it looks wrong. If you pull, it'll undo itself. So make sure that when you're making your square knot, that it's left over right, right over left, or it'll be right over left, left over right. Okay, so it's always the opposite. If you're trying to make a square knot and you go left over right and you accidentally go left over right again, you will create what's called a granny knot, and this knot isn't tight at all. If you pull, this thing will just slip out. So don't do the granny knot. Okay, a thief's knot is when you come inside a loop. Okay, here's my tail. You're going to join two pieces of rope. You're going to come inside, going to come around and back out. This is a thief's knot. Now you're probably sitting there thinking, looks pretty much like a square knot, doesn't it? This is a thief's knot. Don't get this mixed up with a square knot. The difference between a square knot and a thief's knot is the tails. One tail, if it was a square knot, both tails would be on the same side of the line. But a thief's knot, you put one tail on each side of the line, and the problem with this is it'll undo itself. So a lot of times, if for example, when I was in the service, we used to tie thief knots on our gear because we could use that as an indicator to see if people had been tampering with our stuff. So again, you have a tail on the bottom and a tail on the top, and they don't hold together very well at all. Not like the square knot does. Okay, a thief's knot looks very similar to a square knot. So I'm going to come in, around everything, and out the top. Pull it tight. Looks just like a square knot, except you have one tail on the bottom and one tail on the top. This is a knot that we used to use in the military to tell if people were tampering with our bags. Because if they did, they'd tie a regular square knot instead of a thief's knot. It's much easier to tie a square knot than it is a thief's knot. The bad part about the thief's knot is it comes undone when under pressure. The thief's knot, okay, I don't really have anything to show for the thief's knot, but I did talk about it earlier, and that's basically, like I said, you're going to tie your bag shut with a square knot normally, but if you suspect somebody getting into your gear, tie a thief's knot, because a lot of times when they get into your gear or whatever and you come back and find your bag, it'll have a square knot in it. That's a thief's knot. Granny knot, nothing.